What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. Training camp kicks off tomorrow, and there is an unlikely name, or at least unexpected in my opinion, that seems like it's starting to pick up some trade interest in Allen Lazard. Jets fans, we feel like we know him very well at this point. $11 million a year contract. He comes in, we get 311 yards of production out of him, and I think a single touchdown. But he offset that with a ton of penalties, bad route running. I don't even think we got the same caliber of run blocker as we've generally seen. And so from the outside looking in, I can see the perspective on him being, okay, that is a guy that didn't deserve his contract at $11 million a year, and he can't succeed out of the Green Bay Packers framework. But the New York Jets' general historical perception in the last decade or two has been that we are a team that has no idea what we're doing offensively, right? Defensively, pick us off left and right. We know how to stash, develop these guys, turn them into superstars. But offensively, our ineptitude sometimes works in our favor because a team that looks at a skill set or a player that can't succeed in this environment because of the coaching staff or whatever other attributes you want to attach to it, those guys are looking at them saying, well, this is a huge value deal for us, right? And once training camp kicks off, and we get about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks in, and teams really get a feel for what's happening in their wide receiver rooms, how reliable are their running backs, do they have some tight ends that can contribute at a highly efficient level or highly productive level. Some guys are going to want to shore up that wide receiver room. It's been 3 names tossed out so far: Steelers, Eagles, and the Lions. And it is intriguing to me that it seems like interest is growing here, right? This has been, it's not the first time I'm seeing this, but it seems like more and more of these articles are kind of popping up, signaling maybe a late round draft pick being exchanged for a guy like Allen Lazard. And focusing in on the Steelers here looks very interesting to me because I can see that being the most likely destination out of the Eagles and Lions. And it's mostly just because of the talent perspective, right? You're talking about Arthur Smith being their new offensive coordinator, so they're running a heavier offensive scheme, a run heavier offensive scheme. So there's not going to be necessarily a need to have a top tier wide receiver 2 guy, right? It's obviously nice no matter what system you're running, whatever philosophy you have, but you don't absolutely require that, right? That's why I'm not necessarily 100% believing in the Brandon Ayuk connection interest. Again, all 32 teams would love to have this guy on their roster, but how many targets do you really have to go around when you also need to feed George Pickens the ball? You already have Russell Wilson, right, who's going to be a guy that's going to take away some of those passing targets as well as he ends up running, getting some solid enough rushing attempts on the ground, if you will. And then even then, if Justin Fields beats him out or they decide to switch to him, again, a guy that loves to contribute on the ground. So not a ton of targets, right? And then you take a look at who's competing for that number 2 spot. Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin III, Scotty Miller, Quez Watkins, and newly drafted Roman Wilson. Generally, most of these guys have the physical build of a slot receiver, for one, but 2, none of those names are generally ones that are going to cause the defenses to specifically have to game plan around for, right? Quez Watkins, Van Jefferson probably being the most successful from a production standpoint in that wide receiver room, and Roman Wilson, we'll see. You never know with draft picks in a rookie year, so Allen Lazard could be favorable to him, right? A cheap insurance policy bolsters that room. His fit will be as a run blocker that should be able to provide above average to elite production, if you want to call it, from that aspect, and he doesn't have to put up huge numbers in the passing attack, right? If you get a 600 to 700 yard season out of him with a handful of touchdowns, you can consider it a win if George Pickens continues his ascent as a wide receiver 1 in the NFL. So I wouldn't be surprised if this can get done, right? Omar Khan, the GM, he's working with around $15 million in cap space for the Steelers, so it's not an issue of how do we, get a guy like this onto the roster. And if they are truly considering Brandon Ayuk, that lets you know that they definitely have significant money that can be moved around our way to fit that in. So when I look at it in the grand scheme of things, Yes, Brandon Ayuk, much more talented, will put up a much better season than Allen Lazard 10 out of 10 times. But if you don't necessarily need to rely on that production and you can just get away with a solid season, Allen Lazard is the value deal here that you're looking for. From the Jets' perspective, we're going to be saving about $10 million, again, on paper. Depends on if we need to eat into the contract or not. And we receive a late-round draft pick, probably a 6th or a 7th rounder. And at this point, I would absolutely jump on it because one of the things I find intriguing about if there is actual interest here for Allen Lazard is everything I already mentioned, right, from an outside perspective view. But if you think about it from the Jets' perspective, we felt, pretty solid about him coming in, right? Plenty of people thought he may be better than a Corey Davis or at least as adequate as Corey Davis. It probably offered some better production in areas like run blocking, in areas like not being penalized, at least being healthy and staying on the field for one. But Allen Lazard, thinking back to training camp last year, he was pretty much a non-factor in my opinion. Yes, there was some highlights out there about him catching some balls and stuff like that, but it was never anything crazy, right? It was maybe 1 or 2 highlight catches, and that's underselling a little bit, most likely, but just from what I recall, a couple of highlight catches, but nothing amazing, right? Jason Brownlee was more hyped than Allen Lazard, for example. So not a guy that was overwhelmingly good, not a guy that was overwhelmingly terrible last year, and this was when Aaron Rodgers was healthy. So seeing everything absolutely crumble for him last year doesn't really give me hope, considering the fact that he couldn't stand out during OTAs this season either. And again, running down our list of the wide receiver room, it's not like he has top tier talent he's competing against. Garrett Wilson's locked in at number 1. Xavier Gibson's an undrafted free agent, but his chemistry seems to be through the roof with Aaron Rodgers from what we saw. Then you have Malachi Corley, raw rookie. Coaching staff's already acknowledged that. Not a guy you expect to see the field a ton, at least very often, without it being a game plan specific, situation for him to get the ball in his hands. And then a ton of undrafted free agents behind him, right? Jason Brownlee, Irvin Charles. So I feel like I'm forgetting another name there, but nonetheless, Allen Lazard, by all accounts, should be wide receiver 2 in this roster, and it's not happening. So, again, 6th, 7th round pick for a guy that we realistically don't even want to see make the team, right? I would argue that getting a full season out of Jason Brownlee last year, if he was seeing action in all 17 games, you're getting about the same production out of what you saw from Allen Lazard last year. Granted, quarterback situation was terrible and all these other things, but ultimately, if you're a Jets fan, I doubt any of you would argue that you're dying to keep him on this roster, but let me know Allen Lazard's trade interest. If it does end up being true and we can get him off somewhere, let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you again. Peace.